To the specific question in terms of backlogs, there's a way to do it and there's a way not to do it. What you don't do is you don't delete individuals that have been there. It's just not fair. You don't do it by compounding the problem by having ministerial instructions not well thought through, so you get an additional 150,000 plus added to it. The way you do it in dealing with the backlog is that you have a choice. You either start increasing your numbers. No, but you have a choice. You could start looking at increasing your intake of immigrants, which would allow you to deal with the backlog. You also can limit the number of individuals that are putting their applications in. So it's a combination of the two. You always got to look at it from the perspective of an immigration mixture. You cannot have, let's say, for example, Canada has 250,000 immigrants a year. If I said to you we're going to have 100,000 parents and grandparents coming annually, that's not going to work. You have to take a mixture of everything from your entrepreneurs to your economics to your family reunification, and if you get the right mixture, you can then allow for a larger number coming in. You don't have the same requirements for temporary foreign workers, but what it means is that you have to approach it with the right attitude and you have to be patient in working it through. When you talk about the Canadian Experience class, that's an excellent class. So is the economics. There are some issues in regards to the economic immigrant in terms of the point structures. We've all heard the stories of a doctor that's driving a taxi. We all hear of individuals that come to Canada with incredible credentials, but those credentials are not being recognized. We need to see stronger leadership coming from Ottawa, working with the provinces and the different stakeholders.
Okay, for example.
Yeah, no, but we don't want to debate. I'm just sharing some ideas with you.
One question at a time, please.
Okay, you asked your question. We need to let others. We can't take up the whole morning with one question. I'm sorry. We have to rotate. Okay, that's it. Thank you.
Yes, that's right.
Good afternoon to all members. Assalamu alaikum. Peace be upon you all. My name is Sarah Millette. I am a Canadian citizen, fourth generation. I've been raised in a society who fights for the rights of every person, their speech and their religion. We are a kind people, a just people, a helping people. The Immigration and Refugee Board, along with the Canada Border Services Agency, have failed what we stand for in the case of my husband. We have not been able to have legal counsel. He is currently detained at a holding center and scheduled for removal on June the 11th. He is a citizen of the Gambia in West Africa. Annual Report 2012, Amnesty International. Gambia continues to restrict freedom of expression, government opponents, human rights defenders, and journalists were arbitrarily arrested and detained. Torture and other ill treatment were carried out by security forces, and there were unresolved cases of enforced disappearances. One example, we had some activists distributing anti-government T-shirts to end the dictatorship in West Africa. They were detained, arrested. One has been sentenced to 30 years. I'm here today to urge any member, any media, anybody for assistance. I need your help. We have to stop his removal at any opportunity that we can, for at least an opportunity for pre-removal risk assessment. Mohammed is a good man. He is an educated man. He is in opposition of the government where he lives. He has family there. He fears for them. I will be where he is. We simply cannot go to the Gambia. We cannot set foot there with this removal. I am already organizing a campaign to stop his deportation on the violation of his human rights for asylum in Canada. I have a petition that is growing, and I have his friends and his family from the UK military sending their witness statements being notarized by their leader. I am contacting media sources for assistance, including Freedom Newspaper, operating out of the Gambia. This is about human rights. This is about justice. This is about Canada. This is about Canada fulfilling their promise to assist people in need of protection and show what we are supposed to stand for. Thank you. I need some help.
Not knowing the individual facts of the case, I can't speak to the case. However, we're deporting people. We shouldn't be deporting people. There's cases that they're saying we're not going to deport them until the situation there changes, and they're holding in abeyance. and if the situation changes until your hearing is done, then they will deport you. There's certain countries in the world that human rights are gone out the window. There's countries that are part of the G20, the G20 that have absolute no human rights. And you will hear us advocate that if you want to be part of the G8 or the G20, or you want to deal with them, you must respect human rights, freedom of religion, and freedom of the press. Unfortunately, there's countries today where are part of the G20 and they're not respecting those adherences. So I would like to, for being myself, the office from Toronto, to sort of speak to you afterwards so we can see if we can provide any assistance to you. So I'm reluctant to speak publicly about a particular case or ask you questions that I don't think are pertinent to the rest. So, okay. And I also see some other individuals that says no deportations to Iran. I haven't been to Iran in 2003 after Kazemi, and unfortunately I couldn't get a visitor visa under my Canadian passport, and I had to get a visitor visa as a Greek businessman, quote unquote, in order to stay in Iran. I got to tell you, I went outside Evan jail. This is not a pretty situation, and Canada should really make good consideration before they deport somebody back to Iran. There's people that should be deporting back to Iran, people that are part of this regime, and they're not being deported.
My name is Irene Kreki. I was born here. My parents actually came to Canada when Mr. Pierre-Elliott Trudeau was the Prime Minister. So I welcome Mr. Justin Trudeau, a very wonderful man, and very hard worker, I can see that. But the reason why I'm here is because when I was a child, I actually went to Pakistan and lived there for 5 years. And even when my cousins from Canada came over, it was like, wow, these people are from Canada. It's like the promised land, you know. It's like such a wonderful place they came from. We looked up to them so highly. And then we came back to Canada, and we got that chance to be in this country again. And I just saw how wonderful it was and how diverse and multicultural. But as growing up, I ended up meeting with people who didn't have status because I was born here, and they weren't. And some people with marital sponsorship issues, some people with children who just, committed an offense and they were being deported, and how hard it was for them to even fight the case because they didn't have the financial support. And really, people are really struggling nowadays. And I just feel like immigration is so so stereotypicalized. It's like based on gender and financial need and health need. You have to meet a certain criteria to come here. And I always thought that Canada was all welcoming and all encompassing. So the question is, I'm just hearing about Jason Kenney, and I'm just, it's really the immigrants who really make what Canada is what it is. And I just feel like even Jason Kenney must have nationality, and why is he being so biased? This is not the Canada that I know. So
maybe we should deport him.
I just feel like he's biased certain people, and I don't know why. There's no reason, really. Why is he doing this? I don't know why people are not asking him about that.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate what it is that you're saying, and I think that many people get a better appreciation for how fortunate we are that have been put in your situation, right, where you've gone abroad and you've come back, and you're there as when you already have status. And, in my travels, whether it's in India or Philippines or other places, there is a genuine desire that people have in terms of Canada and the potential that we have. There are a number of issues. You make reference to marriages, and marriages is a very serious problem. I am constantly trying to get families reunited, especially where there's a marriage involved, and it has gotten more difficult. I have cases, for example, where they say, well, it's a marriage of convenience. Well, the father or the husband is now a father. The wife is, in fact, had a child in India, for example. Issues related to money. Love, money's not an issue when it comes to love. And we need to really work on that file. The answers that we've been that have been given to date in regards to trying to resolve resolve the issue has fallen far short, and it is in fact going to be a priority. One of the reasons why we're trying to go out into the different communities across the country is to try to generate ideas that we can incorporate into what we want to see as an election platform going forward, and policy generation. And in some areas, we'll be raising in the House of Commons, even in the short term. I appreciate your comments. Very heartfelt.
Also, I was just thinking, too, that the new marriage law, I heard that how when people come here as spouse, they actually are not given any papers until 2 years.
Until 2 years.
And I just feel that's not right, because it's really, you're making these immigrants vulnerable, and who knows what situation they'll be in 2 years after they're married, and I just feel like it's not right to do that, and Canada should be more considerate to immigrants too, because after all, we all come from somewhere.
Absolutely, and in fact, when he made that announcement, I was on the record saying that it's not fair, that it will put individuals in a very awkward situation. You know, Jim's heard this story from me before. You know, my son married an American girl, and that was about 1.5 years ago. She's able to come to Canada. You know, after the wedding, she comes to Canada. She calls Canada her home. She's now been landed, and so forth. There is a double standard that's out there. You know, certain countries in the world you can go to, you can get married, and your spouse is with you. You know, I had someone at one of the town halls say, well, why doesn't that same principle apply for other nations around the world? Why can you not go and marry and then bring your spouse here and be processed while your spouse is here? There's a valid argument for that. And that's what I mean in terms of talking about ideas. This is something that came off from one of the floors. And this is something in which we're now going to have to look at and think about. Thank you.
I just want to say that Canada is a beautiful country, and I'm very lucky to be here. And I want to thank you all for working so hard and being here today.
Thank you very much. Next.
Actually, what it is just kind of like a stopover. Jim wanted me to be able to come for this, and I do appreciate the opportunity. Having said that, the only thing that maybe I can kind of conclude on is that I really appreciate the fact that we had the provincial minister here. And the reason being is that I do believe the province does have a larger role to play with regards to immigration. And it is something in which, and I know I'll be meeting with Michael later in the week, and we're going to talk a lot about the nominee program. There's an opportunity for people to get engaged. Please take advantage of that opportunity wherever you can. Immigration is a critically important issue. There's other individuals around the round table that will be taking notes from this afternoon, and no doubt some of those will be coming back my way. I do thank you for taking the time to come out. Have a great day. Thank you.
Okay.
Actually, Gavin asked for some suggestions. I'll give you, first of all, good afternoon. My name is Shahid Hashmi. I'm the chairman of Canada Chamber of Commerce. I'm not an immigrant consultant, but I do help a lot in my community, in our community. And time to time I need help. Mr. Tim Kerry Candace is always very helpful. Always very helpful in pride. Kevin, the suggestion is that some of the marriages are done out of the country and they're waiting for their spouses. And some of them have also already have 2 kids and 3 kids and having too much distress with their work back and forth, all those things. I think that, like you just mentioned it, bring them over here and then put the process through for the immigration. If for any reason they do not qualify, deport them. There are some odd cases which are the fraud marriages, and that's one of the reasons why the leaving is more. So just because of the, I don't know what's the percentage of the fraud cases, just because of those, don't hold those people who are very stressful, financially struggling, and waiting for their spouses and having their kids out of Canada. My suggestion is, please kindly bring them to the country and then process through their mission. Okay? Oh, one more thing after.
Sure.
My son Sohaib is the one who is helping more with the community, and he does work very hard for the community.
Thank you.
I want to ask some questions about the skilled worker. It was 1 year ago it was freeze, and after they announced new occupations, there is no medical worker So,
Doctors never qualified.
okay.
Sorry, go ahead.
And previous one, it was those specialties in the list. I want to know that is there any new program for specialist physicians or family physicians? And also, second, my question about sponsorship of like a family member, like a brother or sister. Province of Ontario doesn't have such a program, and as I know, federal programs also doesn't have.
Thank you for the questions. Parental reunification or family reunification. This is you sponsored your parents and all your single siblings come with it. That died back in 1991 or 92. It was C-83, if I remember correctly. So the Conservative government of Brian Mulroney put a stop into you being able to sponsor your parents and your family, anybody that was single, up to whatever age. The Liberals brought in a family class sponsorship, was parents and children under the age of 18. We may have seen that was a mistake, so we raised that up to the age of 22. The new immigration proposal as it stands right now, if you want to sponsor your parents, starting in 2014, you'll be able to have 5,000 applications per year. You will have to earn a lot more money that you're currently earning. Children or brothers and sisters over the age of 18 will not be able to come, and you will also be responsible for 20 years. So in your case, if you wanted to sponsor your family, your extended family, you cannot. Under the point system, they were given points for having family in Canada, but as it stands right now, there's new rules and regulations that are coming out. CIC.gc.ca, you can just drop on there and take the regulations as they are. I don't remember, I could be wrong, but I don't remember us ever asking for family doctors or general practitioners to come to Canada as an independent applicants because they have to qualify under the province that they apply to, and I think that still is the case. I could be wrong, but I still think it's the case. All right? Thank you.
Previous program, it says that
it was not general practitioners.
It was 28, list of 28 for federal skilled worker is the category of skilled worker. Specialist physician, also family physician was in the list. But
God help you though, when you came to Ontario, you're only allowed 24 per year.
Ontario?
24 per year, and that's 48.
You're talking about federal skilled worker.
Right, but in order to come to Canada and be qualified as a practitioner, a general practitioner, if I'm not wrong, you have to give exams in Canada. And in Ontario, it used to be 24 workers, and it became 48.
Now, this is completely another program that was removed. He's right. No physician, no specialist physician, but the blind people, they still there. I know you're concerned because...
Under the point system, physicians were allowed?
Yes. They
I could be wrong, but I beg to differ.
Of course they did. For a long time.
I'm an expert on this. There he is.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yes. Let's take the next question.
And there's two brief points that I'd like to make this afternoon. And they both address things that the Liberals could do immediately to assist refugees. One has to do with DCO countries, designated countries of origin. Minister Kenney brought in a new law under which 37 countries have been designated. Countries can easily be taken off. It's at the minister's discretion. It doesn't need a legislative amendment, and some countries we know have horrid human rights conditions, such as Hungary and Mexico. And so something the Liberals could do right now is push for the removal of countries with very poor human rights records. Secondly, we're running an Access to Justice campaign which has to do with legal aid Ontario. And this is something, an area where refugee matters intersects with the province because legal aid has always had a very generous system to fund counsel for refugees. Legal aid is revamping the system for refugees at a time when refugees are facing serious pressure from the federal government in terms of the new laws. The numbers are down. Minister Kenney has said the numbers are down for new arrivals of refugees by about 70%, and we're trying to advocate with the Attorney General of Ontario that there's no need for legal aid to engage in cutbacks right now because refugees need access to counsel more than ever now to make sure they have a right to have a fair hearing. And that's something, again, that the Liberals can push for on a provincial level. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'd like to let you know that Canada is the best country in the world. Very accommodating, very considerate, and very compassionate. But let us not abuse the system. Now my question is, it's just a simple question. How long can we sponsor a living caregiver? How long would it take?
Oh, yeah. Loaded question. Thank you for it. Depends what country they're coming from. If they're coming from the Philippines, you could be looking anywhere between 24 to 48 months for the processing. A lot of Filipinos have seen that it takes such a long time to be processed out of the Philippines, so a lot of them are traveling to other countries. And we had a study done, and it showed that in different countries, it can take anywhere between 6 months to a year, depends where they're from. And you know that in the community, the Filipino community, a lot of the nannies are certainly moving around. But what is happening is that while the length of time that it takes to come to Canada is going exponentially up, the number of applications and the declining of the rejection was declining very rapidly. So you had this graph that was going this way. Length of time going exponentially up. Applications denial was going exponentially down. So that was caught, that was pointed out to the government about 3 years ago. Things haven't changed. So the length of time is 2015, get rid of Kenny.
24 months. Is there a way we can speed up the...
Fire Kenny.
I know it's there.
Fire Kenny.
But is there a way?
Look, you got to remember, there's always ways to do things if there's a willingness. Unfortunately, with this Conservative government, there's not a willingness. There's not a willingness when you see applications of people applying from inside Canada to get their citizenship, and that is taking 44 months, 45 months, 46 months. If for whatever reason, when you apply to become a citizen, they don't accept your stay in Canada, and you're asked to do an RQ residency questionnaire. That, if you're in Toronto, 44 months. If you're in Vancouver, 46 months. And I remember asking about Calgary. Calgary was 18 months. Just happened at the minister's hometown. So it's discriminate. Unfortunately, one of the things that we've got to do, we've got to make sure that the applications, the processing, globally moves in the same speed. So if you're a Filipino applying from the Philippines in order to come to Canada, you shouldn't be having to wait 24 months, 48 months, as if you are somebody which is a Filipino applying from Dubai or Qatar. Thank you. Thank you.
Hi. Good afternoon, everyone, and I hope you can see me at the time. My name is...
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, sorry. My name is Linda D'Souza, and I work at the University of Toronto. My reason for coming here today is to hear and to understand what I can understand. I want to take this opportunity first to thank you, Mr. Cargiana, for so many things that you've helped me with me and my family and a lot of other people that I know. Thank you so much. I'm really indebted to you. My children were born here, and I have been here in Canada for the past 30 years. I'm so fortunate, and I want to give that option to anyone who really have the sort of reason and know that they can contribute to this society and to this wonderful country. I am at a loss to understand how Kenny has the audacity of deciding on his own, or whatever, to discontinue all those thousands of people who applied 2006 and later. In one sort of a day, we get to know that their aspirations, their
the hopes and their dreams to make this their home has all gone down the drain. Why? I feel that if, like my dear, you did mention that there's no backlog. Okay, there's no backlog. So what is the reason why we could not say, okay, we need skilled labor, we need this profession here. Look through those applications, give those people at least an opportunity. I'm personally standing here, I do not care if I am here to help someone from Egypt, someone from Pakistan, someone from any country, even if they're not related to me. I am here to help them come into this wonderful land to live like the way I'm living, in peace and harmony. So, what are you guys doing? And just accepting Kenny's idea of discarding all those 2006 applications. How can we give those people hopes that they still can come? I don't want to ask them to reapply.
You might have to.
Yeah.
You might have to. Thank you. And I've seen the battle that you've put on, and for that we're very grateful. When the Liberals left power, there was something like 800,000 cases in the backlog. People were allowed to apply, and there was no determination when you cut it off. And within about a year after them being into power, 2007, the length of time that it took from different sources for people to come into Canada globally went up by 21%. There was a study done. We presented the study in the House of Commons, and I personally went after the Minister of Citizenship and Immigration. That exponentially was going higher in countries such as South Asia as well as China. We've asked the Minister Monty Solberg at the time, we've asked the Minister Diane Finley, what were they going to do to address the backlog? And I can probably send to you about 20 quotes, and anybody here is more than welcome to ask for them, and I'll send them to you. Time after time saying, we're going to dedicate more resources, we're going to dedicate more money and everything else in order to deal with the backlog. And at that point in time, we said, look, stop encouraging people to come in until we deal with the backlog. This is a contract that people have done. People they've chosen to come to Canada, they've given you their money, and unless they fail the requirements in the contract that they signed with the Canadian government, then we should not get rid of them. Well, no, we're going to deal with them. So there were omnibus bills that were passed, and those omnibus bills were tied into the budget. So if we didn't seem that we were supporting, and it was a minority government at the time, if we didn't seem that we were supporting the budget, then we were not supporting the country. That was a means of them being able to proceed and shovel those changes through. There was Bill C-50. What other bills were there? There was the Refugee Bill C-37. It was all kinds of legislation. And yet when they form a clear majority, they're saying, whoops, that's it, backlog gone. Now, the minister said in 2008, anybody, the C-50, anybody before, we will deal with this backlog, and anybody from now on has the opportunity to apply this, this, and this. And fast forward to current arrangements is that we're bringing in 500,000 people a year, foreign workers. And these foreign workers that are coming in are people that are supposed to be coming into Canada to enhance the skills of Canadians. So if you're a foreign worker and I'm inviting you to come to Canada, you must have skills that I as a Canadian do not have. You must come to this business that I'm bringing you into in order for you, after you live 2 years, to leave some of the skills behind. Well, 500,000 foreign workers, unfortunately, is a little bit too much. I am sure that had they data mined the applications, the 280,000 applications, they would have found people that were...
There you go.
Definitely.
Exactly, Jim. If you say that we do need skilled workers to enhance the skills of our people here, then how do you think that they want any skilled workers in those thousands of applications? And
let me give you some other facts. I put a petition up on my website and I asked the people from overseas to sign so that we'll go to Kenya and say, don't delete our applications. I received about 4,800 emails. Most of the emails that I received were from China, Africa, and India. So if this is any indication as to where the people that were applying for were getting deleted, I don't have to say any more. Mr. Kenny has got to read those 4 words behind me. So I think that
It's not ethical.
it's not ethical, it's not fair, and it's certainly not something that is the Canadian way. You just cannot delete 280,000 applications when people have made a contract with the government. There was an ongoing case, and I think, if I'm not mistaken, they've lost, but I think they're appealing to the Supreme Court of Canada. I'm not too familiar with it. So there's still hope. All right? There's still hope.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, welcome. My name is Bob. I'm a university student at the University of Toronto. I'm also the vice president at the Chinese Student Association. And my problem is there is many students graduating from U of T every single year, but most of them, especially most of the Chinese students, they graduate and they back to China. The reason is that they graduate, they cannot find job, and then they back home. And they graduate, they hardly stay, and then they back to home. And the problem is many of them want to stay here. They spend a lot of years in here. They spend a lot of years in university, and they finally get a lot of certificates. They get a bachelor degree, and they cannot stay here. They have to go back. And I'm a third-year student, and it seems my Chinese friends group shrink every single April. Because every single April after the graduation ceremony, most of them back to China. And most of them have never come back. And I recruit many of my friends every single September because a lot of new students come in September. And some of my friends graduate from the Rajman Commerce School, and they cannot find job. And then they go to the interview. They ask them, well, are you a citizen or not? They say, oh, I'm not a citizen. Sorry, this is not a job for you. Are you English or not? I'm not English. So sorry, there's no job for me. And the problem is they're really hard to say. And this is my own story. Is I have been in Canada for 6 years, and I applied the citizenship test exactly on the 3rd year. But until last winter, I finally get my citizenship, and therefore it's a very long time delay. And I read the whole article, and I see the very end sentence is Kenya should resign or be fired. And from a lot of stories, I see, oh, maybe Kenya's policy harms a lot of refugees, harms a lot of family reunification, and things like that. And what about students? Do you think the Kenya's policy harms the students to stay here, or?
Hey, Jim.
Oh, do I have stories for that one? Thank you. Thanks so much for coming. We bring in close to anywhere between 50 to 55,000 students per year. Educational business is a multi-billion-dollar industry, and once the student comes to Canada, I think they're given 2 years open work permit. After, is it 2 or 3? 3? 3. Okay, that's why I said I think. 3 years. 3 years. They're given an opportunity to work in Canada for 3 years, and after that, there's what's called the Canadian experience in order for them to apply. Unfortunately, there's not enough resources to support the foreign students. A lot of the foreign students are left up to their own devices, how to survive in Canada. And coming in as a student from another country, never mind going from leaving home at 19 years old and going, let's say, from Toronto to Kingston or going to Brock. I mean, you're coming halfway around the world. I think we need to work with you in order to provide more resources to students, and at the end to work, if I can say data mine, or I wouldn't say data mine, but to try to keep the students that in Canada that can be productive Canadian citizens. Some of the students that come over are coming over just to learn and they go back, but some of the students that come over certainly have a lot to give, and those students we've got to be at the forefront in order to keep them. Number one, they get Canadian experience. Number two, you don't have to qualify their education because they studied in Canada. They are practically, if you're here for 5 or 6 years studying, you're just part of the family. You're Canadian. So those are the students that we have to encourage to stay. So I understand your student numbers are going less and less because there is less immigrants coming in from China, but let's work together in order to make sure that we do keep the best and the brightest. Thank you.
Good afternoon. Thank you all for attendance and to our government representatives. I am Syrian. I'm a Canadian. Yes, we have met Jim. And I want to talk about just one of the small issues when it comes to the refugee crisis in Syria. You know, I'm concerned not as a Syrian, not as a Canadian, but honestly as a human being. Canada has taken a leadership role. I don't know if people know this. Canada is the #1 country in the world when it comes to immigration, but yet we've done very little when it comes to Syria. And there's, I don't want to say zero.
Zero.
But,
Come on, say it. Zero.
There's many issues I can get into, but there's one that I want to raise to the attention of our representatives and to everyone here, because it is a precedent that is being unique possibly to the Syrian crisis right now, but can affect other refugee crises in the future. So principally, there's two ways that refugees can enter this country. One is through a government resettlement program, and the other is through private sponsorship. And according to the government's policy right now is, in both cases, the refugees need to be recognized by the UNHCR. Now, unfortunately, with the situation in Syria, over 1.5 million people have registered, and I mean, we're talking about less than a fraction of a percent actually have any recognition. So essentially, this has created a situation where refugees can't come into this country without this recognition. And this is an important issue that we need to start discussing. Is do we need to take a look at this when there's exceptional situations in changing this policy now? As a Canadian, I'm obviously concerned about our security. Going through the UNHCR, there's obviously protocols and processes that are followed to ensure better security. But any immigrant that comes to this country needs to go through security and health checks. So there's no excuse when it comes to that. So what I want to know is if you have any commentary on when these crises and situations arise, what can we do about it? How can we make sure that this type of bureaucracy, this UNHCR recognition, doesn't limit us from making a difference, because it's 2 years on and the refugee crisis is only getting worse every day, and this can happen for other countries in the future if they're in a situation where they can't bring refugees in because of this recognition issue.
We've been working with the Syrian community for the last 2 years on that same issue. We've asked for emergency debate upon emergency debate. An emergency debate was just held a couple of weeks ago, and yet the Syrian community has been very vocal on 2 issues, and the Conservative government has not done anything. One of the issue is that they want any money that they've raised to match dollar for dollar in order to help the refugees, the displaced people, as well as provide help on the ground in Syria. The Conservatives have said that we're supporting this program and that program. The community, I'm aware, has raised millions, correct?
Somewhere in that number.
Somewhere in that number. And yet, the Conservative government has not matched dollar for dollar. Yes, when we had Haiti, well, I can go back to 2001 when we had the earthquake in Gujarat, and then there was the tsunami, and then there was the earthquake in Muzaffarabad. This was under the Liberals.
I personally matched all of those.
Thank you very much. This was the first one that was done.
The very first one was done. I was the Minister for International Cooperation. I matched dollar for dollar everything raised in the Indian community when the Gujarat earthquake took place in Gujarat. And we started doing so. The Government of Canada worked with the community very closely, and matching every dollar that the community raised, we matched. And then we worked together in partnership to partner the community with international or local NGOs to work with to deliver the services on the ground. It was a partnership with the community.
That's where it started.
From point one to point A.
And yet, when it comes to Syria, not only we don't have programs about speeding family class. When we had Iraq, automatically the only thing you had to write outside the envelope on the sponsorship case was Iraq parental case. Boom, in front of the line. Same thing from China when we had the earthquake. Same thing when we had the tsunami. But in Syria, nothing. So one of the things that the community is totally mad about is that I haven't had a sit-down with Minister of Citizenship and Immigration in order to put this case in front of him. The other thing that you guys are mad about is that we're not matching dollar for dollar. Two things that we're pushing for, and Mr. Ray had requested an emergency debate, and I spoke, and another colleague spoke, was one, dollar for dollar on what you raise. Two, expedite the immigration cases. I have a case of an individual that's sponsored experience since 2008. He's out in Calgary. And his parents are in Dubai. And Mississauga is still sitting on the sponsorship. And they've applied for a super visa. Now, never mind all the local and why are we not engaged, why are we not doing this and not doing that. I would leave that for another series.
Well, it's the UN recognition issue.
The UNHCR.
One of the big roadblocks right now. How
even
change our mindset when there's a crisis, we need to be able to adapt and I'm just curious, what you guys think about being able to adapt when there's emergency crises that happen.
The protocol that was set up through the years was a liberal protocol, is if there's a man-made or a natural disaster. People should be given a visitor visa in order, if they have family in Canada, to come to Canada until the situation change. Two, parentals, spousal, family class applications in front of the line. We even gave ministers permits. Judy's not here, but Judy had, at the time, was the Minister of Citizenship and Immigration in Tsunami. We gave ministers permits for people in order to come to Canada and have their applications being followed throughout Canada. And then the last one was we matched dollar for dollar, as well as we gave upfront millions of dollars to people to work on. That's gone out the window in Syria. But in other countries, it's okay. And when Haiti happened, because we had a lockdown, and the House of Commons was, I think we can call it a lockdown, or prorogued, the Prime Minister went and said, I am making a donation at Red Cross. Well, Prime Minister, where the hell are you now when it comes to Syria? Where the heck are you now when it comes to other countries? Oh, I'm sorry, we don't have a prorogue system. So UNHCR, definitely, we got to make sure that we enhance that. And number two, when Mr. Kenny goes abroad and says, I'm allowing more people to come from Syria, he's not allowing Syrians to come into Canada. These are people that were from Iraq into Syria and Jordan, and these are the applications that he is saying that we're allowing more. He's not allowing any more. It's the same numbers. It's the same numbers, and we had to push them into 2007 in order to do that. Finley was the one that announced 1,000 people, and it went up and up and up and up. But unfortunately, Syria, whatever.
Iranian, I would like to clarify something for everyone. I believe in Canada they are not aware that when it becomes a specific country like Iran, there is no difference between refugee and immigrants. There are 5 million Iranians all around the world. We left the country. As myself, 20 years ago, I came to Canada as a landed immigrant, but in my heart, I was a refugee and still am a refugee because I couldn't live there. And also with this point, the federal government, they are not aware to see that if a lot of Iranians they are in Canada, it's not that they came here for opportunity. They cannot live here, but they continue still for a few of them that they were unfortunate to have these papers. They came here as a refugee status. They continue to deport them. Not in January 2012, when we started the movement, no deportation to Iran, we could stop deportation of cows, Sufi, and I believe at that time the government became aware of the irony of his politics. From one side, he is on the head of all the countries around the world to announce that Iran is a violator of human rights. And the other side, he continues to deport him. And since then, there is no deportation to Iran, and we are very proud to say that deportation to Iran is stopped, not only because of our movement, because of the government, the federal government became aware of this wrongdoing that was doing. But the question today is, although they don't deport any Iranian to Iran, but they continue to proceed the refugees the same way. They send them to jail, they detain them more than 100 days, they handcuff them, chain them. We have 2 suicides in Canada of refugees, and finally, after all of this, they let them stay. And before they become free, they need some bail up to $90,000. And for these 3-4 months, they lose their job, they lose their residence, they lose their credit. Here, I don't have any question, but what I need is not words, it's real support. We are lucky to live in Toronto, Ontario, with a liberal government. As our member, Reza Moridi, he supported all refugees, he came on the street, he manifested with us. We expect for our liberal government, yes, you too, oh yes, you were with us. We need a real support. Because at this level, we cannot only by demonstrating or writing letters on behalf to the government to make changes. We are expecting for our liberal government to act strongly and solid and somehow to stop this torture that they are doing with the Iranian refugees. Thank you.
Thank you. Go ahead.
Okay, actually, I don't have a question. I just.
Oh, you can make a comment. It's okay.
Yeah, I just have a comment regarding the gentleman from the U.S. We have the Dr. Michu Kakun, who is a very big person in American society in terms of string theory and stuff like that. And he's mentioning one thing. He's saying that the United States has a very strong secret weapon, and that's H-1B. H-1B basically is a program that you are allowed to go to the United States, you get your PhD or master, and after 1 year you can apply for a job, and actually 25% of all startups in the U.S., the multi-million dollar startups, are run by these people. So my comment and probably a question is that, we have a program. I came to this country as a skilled worker, but we have like the gentleman just mentioned that we need the skilled worker to train our skilled worker. So that's one great question.
That is foreign workers.
Yeah, foreign workers. Yes, the foreign workers need skilled workers.
No. There's a difference. Okay. If I may just clarify. A foreign worker is somebody that comes into Canada for 2 years on a foreign worker work permit. She or he works for 2 years, and then they have to go back home. Okay. And they are coming in order to fill a job, which is a void, and no Canadian can do, or no Canadian is willing to do, like up north where you got to work, and they most of the time have to transfer their knowledge and skills to the company that is hiring in Canada.
So the question which comes to my mind is that if we don't or we cannot keep the graduates from the university system inside the country, so what's the priority? Would it be better, like the American system, to create a middle class, not importing a middle class? You bring people. I'm single basically, but you bring people with the family, with the wife and with the children, and they come here. And for the first 3-4 years, of course, they have to do other jobs which is not related to their job. And in today's world economy, because the technology is changing so fast, they will go behind the skill set that they need. Because let's say I'm a computer engineer. If I don't get certified in 6 months, my skill set will be obsolete. That's the truth. So my comment is that we have to give the priority to the university graduates and those who come inside the university system as a function to bring them back to the middle class family and the family in Canada.
Good points. Thank you.
We need your help because in certain situations we've been able to move the government, or what Erwin Kotler calls the mobilization of shame, with a certain story, and around the refugee health cuts, it really was because people pointed out that some of the Afghan interpreters who'd been invited by Canada to come were now being denied health care. And so it was when that was pointed out by question in question period that the government actually did have to change its mind and make a, even though they only made a special consideration for that. But we, if the core Canadian value is fairness, if you can help us also for questions in question period, things that just don't seem fair, that long before we form the government in 2 years, we're still going to have to try and get these guys to do something right occasionally. And it is by the stories that you are telling us that seem really unfair and not the way to build a country. And it is only with your help that we're going to get this done. Thanks very much.
Hi there. Thank you, everyone, for organizing this event. I appreciate the opportunity to give the community, and thank you for everyone for attending also. My question is regarding temporary foreign workers. It's a program that's been in the media recently. As I understand it, and I'm not certain that I have it all correctly, but as I understand it, so the program has existed previously for a number of years, but the change that the Conservative government made was that in order to be a temporary foreign worker, if a government is going to hire them, or if a company is going to hire them, they no longer have to pay them the same amount.
That's right. 15% less.
It's up to 15% less. So what are your thoughts in terms of, to me it seems like what we would want to do is to have companies that are going to, if we want to discourage companies from doing this, wouldn't we want to have, rather than a decrease in pay up to 15% less of the set wage, wouldn't we want to have an increase? Or what are your thoughts on those issues?
I don't know if when you came in, there was a handout that was going on. This is an article that was written today by in the Toronto Star, and it reads, yet Kenny has kept bringing 250,000 and more immigrants every year, and it jumps to the next paragraph, says, yet Kenny is also bringing hundreds of thousands of temporary foreign workers, of whom we have at least 500,000. For severely, the program kept growing while the economy slowed down. Faced with public fury, he recently made a show of reforming it by tellingly did not kill it or even cap it. This is Stephen Harper's Republican Economic Theologically, supply business with cheap and plain labor, yabba, 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 15% less, thank you very much.
Essentially, though, I think it's important to understand what really happened here. Prior to the changes that Kenny put in, foreign workers were coming to Canada always, but with a condition that they were only to jobs where there were no Canadians essentially that would do the jobs. And as Jim said earlier, most of them were farm workers, sometimes in construction, if there was a real vacant. But the employer had to put out there for quite a long time to prove that they couldn't find a Canadian to do that job and all that stuff. So, and the numbers were somewhere around 150 or so a year, 1,000, okay? Then what happened is Kenny changed that, and they fast-tracked for businesses to get the people in, so all of those conditions went out the window, essentially. They were technically there, but didn't mean anything. And then they could pay them less. So essentially, it was bringing in large numbers and it was not to replace skills. Now they were replacing low-end jobs at McDonald's, what have you, in Alberta, everywhere else. And they were paying them, they were allowed to pay less money. And that drives employment and jobs down and wages in Canada as well. That's what they were doing it for. I mean, I'll be very frank with you. I'm not going to mince words here. That's just what I personally feel. And I think most people will agree with me, that the reason for increasing, maybe quadrupling the foreign worker program and allowing employers to pay less money, less wages, and fast-tracking them and to fill in all kinds of jobs everywhere, not just where there was a problem, like as we saw with Toronto Dominion Bank and so on, where they're actually bringing people in to train, and the guys who are trained otherwise are going to lose their jobs. I mean, it's absolutely obscene. It was to drive down wages in Canada. This is a government intent as far as I'm concerned. So far, despite the outcry and all of the stuff in the media, nothing really has happened with that program. I think we have to start push back even more aggressively. Because this is what I said earlier when we started it, and that is that traditionally and historically in this country, we have brought in, as the young man was saying with people in New York and students, we brought in people as immigrants. I came as an immigrant as a child. Jim came as a refugee. We came here, and they come and they invest in the country. They build businesses. They raise families. They have jobs. They become the inventors. They become the future. They build the country. Bringing people in for the sole purpose of exploiting and pushing them out. That's what Europe has done. That's why you've got problems in France and everywhere else, because I come from Italy, and I'll tell you, when we came here, you couldn't go to France or to Switzerland or to Germany. The only way to go there was that you would work, but you were never, ever, ever going to be considered a resident, a citizen, and your children would never have citizenship rights. You were always expected to go back to your country, and if you'd been there 30 years and the unemployment went down, then you were kicked out. That is not humane. We build a country here, but that's what is happening now. There are, the article says some 500,000 supposedly. We don't know. The U.S. has millions of people working underground. And that is what we're creating here. That is why what's happened with the foreign worker program is absolutely, totally unacceptable, because our focus should be on immigration and as the young man said earlier, with respect to students who want to stay and aren't being assisted and so on. So I just had to say that, because we talk around the foreign worker program, but some people don't really know exactly what's been happening with it and what the perverse intent of it is and the damage it's doing to this country and to our society. I mean, this is my final example. In BC, a Chinese mining company was allowed to bring in 300 miners, just like that. And the Canadian miners had to go to court, and are still in court, trying to get their rights to work there, to be trained to do that job. So you tell me where justice is. That's my last word. Thank you for your input. I really appreciate that.
Circulating an email to you to give us your thoughts, and to some people did.